This heroic dog saved an entire family by barking nonstop at a burning forest. The family was being chased by enemy soldiers who had set fire to their village and were looking for them so they could kill them, but the dog didn't let that happen. It all started when the soldiers arrived in the village. It was around 8:30 a.m. on May 1944, and the German troops were looking for people to take with them back to Germany. They needed forced labor, so they went house to house, kicking down doors and pulling people out of their beds, separating families. Anyone who resisted was beaten, tortured, or killed. Among the villagers were two brothers named Philip and Janos. The Major family had a farm outside the village and for years had been trying to grow enough food to be able to sell something to the Germans and make some money. In fact, before the war, they'd even expanded their barn just so they could store more grain for the winter. But this year, they hadn't been successful and they had nothing to trade. Still, the Germans came to their farm and took Janos away. His wife, Anna, was crying and begged the soldiers to allow her to go with him because she knew he wouldn't listen to anyone. She knew he would try to hide food or supplies for the partisans who were hiding in the surrounding forests, and he would put himself in danger. She was right. Janos had already been in contact with the partisans, and when the Germans came for him, he grabbed his rifle and tried to fight back. But there were too many of them, and soon he found himself captured and tied up. Meanwhile, at the farm, Anna tried to come up with a plan. Her husband might have been gone, but she still had her two sons, Philip and Janos Jr., and she needed to get them out of there. As soon as she heard gunshots in the distance, she knew that her husband must have escaped, and it wouldn't be long before the Germans came back for her and her sons. She loaded them into the car and drove them toward the forest. At the same time, Janos was being taken through the woods by the German soldiers. He had managed to escape, but now they were after him. They tied him to a tree and ordered him to stay there while they set fire to the forest. Their goal was to smoke out the other partisans who were hiding nearby. But little did they know, he wasn't the only one hiding there. Anna had made it to the edge of the woods and left the car hidden in the bushes. Now she and her two sons were running through the trees, desperately trying to find somewhere to hide. The Germans couldn't see them, but they could hear the gunshots from their rifles. The partisans were fighting back. Suddenly, the mother tripped over a tree root and fell to the ground. She tried to quiet her boys as much as possible, but the branches had made her fall, and they started to cry. Back with the Germans, the partisans, and Janos, things were starting to get out of control. More and more partisans showed up, and soon the soldiers realized that they were outnumbered. They started to run, but not before setting more fires. They wanted to burn the forest to the ground. As the fire approached, the mother and her two sons ran deeper into the woods. Anna kept calling her husband's name, hoping that somehow he could hear her. But instead, what she heard was a dog barking. At first, she thought it was the sound of an animal scared out of its mind by the fire. But then she realized it was coming from above. Looking up, she saw a dog on a rock, barking frantically. The dog looked like a German shepherd, except it was larger and thicker, like a wolf. The barking continued for a full half-hour, never stopping. Then suddenly it leaped off the rock and disappeared into the trees. Anna thought, maybe it wants us to follow it. And so they did. The dog led them to a place where there was a hole dug out under a log, and it motioned for them to crawl through. When they were through, the dog barked again and ran back the way they came. The family followed the path the dog had made until they found another hole. This time it was a vertical hole dug out of the side of a hill. The family crawled through it and found themselves inside a large cave. There were also some people inside who were hiding. The partisan fighters had made it here too, and they were safe. Later, they learned that the dog belonged to one of the partisan groups. One of the men said the dog belonged to the group called Wolf's Lair. The group had set up camp in the cave because it was the perfect hiding spot. It was big enough to fit hundreds of people and had a small opening at the front, but no one could see into it because of the way the trees blocked the view. All they saw was a bunch of trees bunched together. One of the men asked Anna, "Did the dog show you the hole too?" And she nodded. That's when they told her about the cave and how it was the perfect hiding spot. She realized that the dog must have known that she and her sons were being chased by the Germans and brought them here so they could hide. If the dog hadn't barked and led them here, they probably would have died. As the sun began to set, the partisan leaders gathered everyone together. Anna and her two sons sat down near a fire and warmed their cold, tired bodies. Soon, one of the partisan leaders walked over and handed Janice's wife a piece of paper. It was a note from her husband. He had written it right after the Germans took him away. In the note, he told her to take the boys and leave. He had a feeling that things were going to get bad. He also told her to go to the cave. He had a feeling that that's where they would be safe. And he was right. At the end of the day, everyone in the cave stayed safe and no one was hurt. Anna was so grateful for the dog who had barked and saved their lives. She knew that if it hadn't been for the dog, they wouldn't have been able to escape. The next morning, the Germans left. The partisans came out of the cave to see what kind of damage had been done. They lost some food and supplies, but other than that, not much. They were ready to move on and regroup. And before they did, one of the men knelt down next to the dog. He scratched its ears and told it that it had done good. He knew that without the dog, some of them may not have made it. But the dog didn't seem to care about any of the praise. It wagged its tail and then disappeared into the woods. The partisan never saw it again, but they never forgot it. After they had moved on, Anna and her two sons were given permission to go back to their farm. They had lost so much, but they were alive and that's all that mattered. Sometime later, the partisans went back to the cave and they found the dog again. They gave it water and food, and then one of the men tried to pet it, but the dog ran away. No one could get close to it, so they left it alone. The dog remained in the cave for months, staying close to the entrance and barking at anyone who came too close. It never left the cave, but it was always watching what was happening outside of it. One day, a group of scientists came across the cave. They'd been tracking wolves in the area and had heard rumors of a dog living in a cave. They had no idea that there had been partisans living there, and they certainly didn't know about the dog's heroic actions. But when they entered the cave, they found the dog and started studying it. They discovered that the dog wasn't a wolf, but it wasn't just a regular German Shepherd either. It was a hybrid, a wolf and dog mix. But the dog wasn't aggressive, and eventually the scientists were able to get close enough to it that they could study it and learn more about it. They believed that the dog was able to live in the wild because of its size and strength. It was able to hunt for food and defend itself from predators. And it seemed to be very intelligent. The scientists said the dog was probably able to communicate with humans, but it chose not to. Instead, it preferred to live in the wild and be free. The dog remained in the cave for the rest of its life, and no one knows exactly when it died. But the legend of the heroic dog that saved a family from the Germans continues to be told today. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and watch this one next. A tiny kitten is stuck up a tree, and every time a firefighter tries to save him, he runs away.